Hi, this is Kim Nelson with the Jewelry Design Department at FIT. I'm doing a tutorial here on how to do a maquette for a 3-stone ring. I've got some commercial size stones here. I've got an antique cushion, 12 by 10, and I've got a half moon that is 6 by 375. So both of these are stones I can source easily. I'm working with a finger bore of 17 millimeters, which is a standard industry finger bore. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is offset that 2 millimeters, which is a good standard shank thickness. Going to move it up 0.3 millimeters so that it's narrower at the bottom than at the top. You don't want to go below 1.7 normally down here, because after casting and finishing it's going to come down to close to 1.5. If you're really feeling adventurous, take it at 0.35. Okay, so you have this. We now need to line the center stone up so that we already have actually. We want that to be between 6 and 7/10 of a millimeter off the finger. So put it on the finger, and there you go. Going back into top C-plane. You will see that I do that. I work in perspective view. I change C-planes all the time by keyboard shortcut. So if I hit right C-plane, it's like working in the right view. Front C-plane is like working in the front view. And you can find that by going set C-plane and then doing it here. But it's much easier to set a shortcut for it. And the place that you do that is you come to Options, Keyboard, it's either aliases or keyboard. I always forget which one. Aliases. So go to aliases, and for me, I just use the first letter of the word. T for C-plane top. That's the actual command in Rhino. R for C-plane right. Actual command in Rhino. And F for C-plane front. And that way I can just type T, F, R to get my 3 standard C-planes up. So when I change C-planes, that's what's going on. The first thing I got to do is set this up to make sure that it is tucked under the center stone. I'll start with a very minimal tucking under. I'll go ahead and mirror this with history. And then the next question is elevation. Now I did boat or swell the sides of the stone so to represent what a colored stone would be more likely to look like. Usually, there's a couple of ways to do this. I'll do it with curves. No, I won't. I lied to you. I'm going to use a cutting plane, because I can take a cutting plane command. I can click literally anywhere and pull it to either side holding Shift key down, and Rhino will give me a surface that intersects, that covers the full dimensions of that object. And because I'm trying to visualize where I want my under bezel to be, it's going to be helpful to me if I have a surface that'll actually cut off my stone. Usually you want it between 1/3 and 1/4 of the way. So I did go into my front viewport for just a minute. So 1/3 would be about there. That would be the top edge of the under bezel. That's as low as I can go. I want to look at some relationships here. I don't want to go quite that low. As high as I could go would be 1/4, which would be here. I'm going to come somewhere in between. Okay, so that's going to give me the elevation for my under bezel for my center stone. That's important because it's also going to impact where those under bezels take place on the side stones. As we mentioned in class, we want those to work together. Now that I have this, I don't necessarily need to have a surface anymore. So I'm just going to borrow the front edge of this and project it to C-plane. And I can throw that away. And that's a quick way of getting myself a curve there. Now, as far as the under bezels for my side stones, I would like them to be contiguous with that. So I'm going to use near snap. I can't come right up against the side of this. I need to leave a little bit of metal there, about 1 millimeter. It'd be useful to me to be able to see what that millimeter looks like. Going to use near snap, grab that curve, do both sides line, and I'll just pull me a reference curve, which I will then offset maybe 1 millimeter. See, that's going to be way too much. The outer edge of this can't break beyond the girdle of the stone. So I'm going to use an end snap so I can grab right at the corner here and pull it down. I don't want that corner to take place where this hinges any farther out than that. So for now, I'll put it right there. Intersect, snap. And I'm going to pull a line that follows fairly nicely with that shoulder. The more upright I take that stone, the more flat, the bigger it's going to be, but the duller the fire is going to be, and the clunkier it's going to be as an object. Tapering it down makes the center stone much more important, but it makes the side stones almost disappear, and it really dictates the flow of the shoulder. So I'm just going to try and go pretty much parallel visually to what that is there. I'm going to go ahead and move this stone down straight, holding Shift key. And I'm going to picture basically where it hits the middle of the girdle of that stone. And then I'm going to rotate it. And I don't like to use the gumball. That's a personal preference of mine. You can if you want to. But for me, I prefer to just come in here. Grab pretty much anywhere. I'm going to rotate the stone until it seems to line up pretty well with that curve. And then I'll move it back up. And once again, I want that line, that's going to be the top of the under bezel. I want it to be somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3. That's okay. And I can actually have this snug up a little bit tighter under that stone. I have to, because actually it can't be outside of the girdle. So tuck it back under. And you can see that if I tuck this under and I keep that angle, where this corner meets starts to become somewhat of an issue. Going to alleviate that in 2 ways. Going to drop the whole under bezel assembly down a little bit. And then I'm going to move the seam over a little bit. And that'll give me a nice indication of where my under bezel could be. I might leave that curve. That could be useful later. So there. I'm going to join those three together. And I'm going to extrude them straight out. Remember, extrusions are always perpendicular to the active C-plane. So to get it to extrude like so, I need the front C-plane active, which it is. Give myself plenty of room. I don't want to cut this close at all. So now that I have that in place, I can start to get a better sense of how that looks. And I think it's okay. I may move things around a little bit more later, but I think it's okay. I would like to bring, I have a girdle curve here for the stone. I would like to bring that down onto this level. So I'm going to set a C-plane to this surface. And I'm going to project this curve down to the C-plane. I will be honest with you. Where project to the C-plane is, I do no. I've been using it as a, you can type it into the command line. I have it set to the C keyboard shortcut because I use it all the time. I'm going to hit the no option, keep it there because I don't want to lose my original. That curve gives me an idea of what that looks like in three-dimensional space. I can't have the under bezel any bigger than that because that's the girdle. If I go into the top view, that is the girdle. I need it actually to be smaller than that. Not much. Doesn't have to be a lot smaller. But it needs to be smaller. I think that's realistic. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing with these stones. I don't have a pre-existing girdle curve, so I'll just make one by duplicating the border, joining those curves together. And then it's the same situation. I need to set a C-plane to this surface, and that'll allow me to project this curve onto that C-plane, and then I'll be able to offset that curve just a little bit. I'll probably offset that a little bit less. We shall see. And then I can delete that. And this begins to give me some sense of what I'm going to be dealing with in my plate. If I hide my stones, turn off their layers, I can start to see what's going on here. So I'm going to put the C-plane back on top of this surface. I'm going to draw a straight line with project to C-plane turned on my snaps. I'm going to grab the end of this and pull. because I need to have this come up and meet this center line in some way. And there are a couple of ways I can achieve that. And I need to decide how I want to achieve that. But frankly, for a maquette, you know what? I'm overthinking this. It's like I'm modeling it. I'm not going to go that far. I am going to declare that this is okay. All right. So I've got this. I'm going to take off this surface. Extract copy equals no by right-clicking on explode. And I'll replace it with a planar surface. Like so. I'll go ahead and trim that center surface. And then I'm going to offset this surface the thickness that I think I want for my under bezel. Now there's a couple of ways I can do that. I could come here in the front view, turn my stones back on, and do an offset so I can visualize it. Through point, and just rubber band it until I see something that I think looks good for the overall scale of this ring. Say there, okay? And then I can repeat the command and look and see what that was. That was 0.65. It's got to be heavier than that. I can't have an under bezel that's smaller than 9/10. So let's see what 9/10 looks like. Okay, it's going to be heavier. I want it to be heavy. So I'll go with a 1 millimeter. Nope, too heavy, 0.95. And this is a design process. I'm looking at it. Now that I've got that distance, I can come back here, grab this surface, and I have a couple of choices. I can offset surface or I can extrude it. To extrude it, I would once again set the C-plane to that surface because extrusions are always perpendicular to the C-plane. Go to solid, extrude surface straight, and I would extrude it minus 0.95. Now it's going to leave that original surface behind, which I can now delete. I can do the same thing for the center. Set a C-plane here, and extrude straight. And the same distance. And mirror that over. And that'll give me an idea of what I'm looking at for a potential under bezel for this piece. My next question is going to be, how does that relate, going back to my top C-plane. Whenever I'm not modeling, I drop it back to top C-plane because that's the standard view. Now that I see it, those might be too thin. But I'm not going to worry about that. It was just to give me an idea. I won't be using them anyway, to be honest with you. So I'm going to go into my front C-plane. I'm going to now draw the front of this a little bit. Going to take a line. And I want it to come inward. Now remember, if you look at the samples we gave you, you can have that come anywhere from into the center to like this. It can be anything you want. Generally, I like to aim somewhere like halfway between the girdle, between the apex of the finger bore and the center of the bore. So I usually come somewhere like that. Maybe a little lower. Depends on how wide the head is. I'm going to splay that out just so I can get a sense of whether I like that or not. I do. That's going to be fine. So now I do run into a little bit of a challenge. Because what I would like to do is just extrude that straight down and have it be what I want. That would be the easiest way to maquette or model this. So, I still have my curves here, right? So, what I want to do is I'm going to go right-click to extract a surface. This time I'll say copy yes. I have it set to the orange layer, so it'll do the same thing, but with orange. Going to untrim. Untrim all. I'm going to extend this surface till it intersects with that one. I'm going to use it to trim the top of that off. That way I know I have a really tight fit here. In fact, just so I can see that, I might extract an iso curve. To catch the corner of it. I'm going to come back and look at my lines. It would be all kinds of wonderful if I still had the curve. There it is. I'm going to just change that to the blue so I can see it easier for a minute. Same with this. Change layer to blue. Okay, so I know that this is going to work until here, and then it's not going to work. And I have a choice of what I can do with this, but what I think would be the most graceful thing to do, I'll go ahead and use that extract iso curve command again. T to toggle direction, intersect, snap to take it right here. Okay, I'm going to offset that. I need to be on the right C-plane to do that, so I'll set my C-plane. Top C-plane would have worked, but I may as well set it to the surface I'm working on. I want to be able to blend these two together in a pretty way. So I'm going to come out, I think, that far. Mirror it over. And I'm going to use that to trim. I might want this curve back at some point in time. Copy, paste, hide. Just so if I want that curve untrimmed in the future, I can find it. So I've got that. I'm going to use this curve and trim off the back side. I also might want this someday, so hide. I can trim the back of those curves off with the surface. I can trim it off with a curve. Doesn't matter. They're right here. Okay? And I'm going to do a blend curve. I always prefer the adjustable blend curves. It's going to give me a weird bump. I don't care. If I hold the shift key down while I drag on these control points, I can get a symmetrical effect. I think that's nice, except for it's a bump. To make it not a bump, I can either project it onto the surface, set a C-plane, project to C-plane. It's a project either way. I'll project the surface, delete input yes. There we go. Mirror it over. Mirror it over. Mirror this over. And join them all together. That gives me a single curved element that I can now work with. I'm going to see what happens when I extrude those to a point. Frankly, that point. The main thing I want to see is how do I feel about what that's doing here at the bottom. And to see that more clearly, I'm going to go ahead and maquette my ring shank. It's a straight extrude, solid yes, 1 millimeter each side. Basic 2 millimeter shank. That may not be what I end up with in my design. But it does give me a good sense of what I'm looking at here. And the answer is not so much. I don't really love what's happening down here. So I would want to modify that some more. And there are a couple of ways I can go about that. But I think that as a place to end, because this is going to be a long video if I don't, and that gives you some idea of how you can start thinking about maquetting this. Already you can see how that head section is looking. I can grab that, extrude it out, and either trim it or just leave it so I visualize. Either one will work. And that starts to give me a real sense of what's happening down in here. I'll clean this up just a little bit because it'll make it fun if I do. I'm going to take this curve that I have. I'm going to do something a little destructive. I'm going to trim it. I'm going to cut it in half. Just for a minute. Trim. Oh, it won't cut it in half that way. What am I thinking? To cut it in half, I need a cutting plane. Sorry. Top C plane, cutting plane at 0. Gives me a nice surface that I can, actually I want it going the other way. Once again, cutting plane at 0, going side to side. Now I can use that surface to cut this in half. Take this curve, front C-plane, project to C-plane, delete the original, copy to clipboard. That takes it out of Rhino. So I can undo, without hurting anything, paste that back in, and now I have a nice curve that represents that I can use to extrude straight. I can take this curve, I can trim the rest of it off, which will allow me to close that up should I want to do so. More importantly, having done that, gives me a curve to offset. And I had realized that the 1 millimeter looked too thin to me. I'm going to go 1.2 because what I had here looked a little too delicate to me. So I have that. And your typical finger rest is about 1 millimeter. Can be thicker. I'm going to go 1.1. It could go as thin as 9. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 1. and then I'm going to scale that curve up. And the reason I'm going to do it from its quad is so that the finger rest can be narrower in the middle, thinner in the middle here, and a little thicker at the sides, because that's often structurally a nice thing to do. And I'm doing a maquette, so it doesn't matter a lot, but it doesn't take any extra effort to do, so why not? So I have this, probably the easiest thing, and I've been drawing all this in blue, which is really dumb, because I can't see it if I change my colors. And I'll put it on any other layer, doesn't matter. I want this to cut out the center of that block. So I'm just going to draw a straight line, a straight line segment. Angle doesn't matter much. Sorry that that's not a really visible color. Hopefully that is not any better. All right. So let's go darker. Nice and dark. That'll be visible. Okay. I'm going to trim the outside of this. When I join this together, I should have a closed curve, which I do. Bring back my initial maquette. Extrude this out. S for solid equals yes. Okay, so I've got this item. Now, it's not going to want to give me a nice Boolean unless I close the bottom. So I'll do that quickly. Takes a second. Just grab that. Grab my maquette of the center of the head and trim. Oops, trim the wrong thing. And trim. I should be able to now join those together like so. And to be clear, these are not connected in any way. Three pieces there. Going to do a Boolean difference. And that'll give me a starting point. Okay? Now, just for hygiene, guys, when you're modeling, before I do that ever, I'll take both of these items, Control-C, Control-V, copy-paste, Control-G, group them together, Control-D, change layer, and I'll put them in storage, so that I've always got a copy of that step before I Booleaned it, because unbooleaning things is not easy to do, like it's impossible. There you go. Okay, so our ring, we can see our shank is thicker here. It won't be in the finished piece, of course. And we may change angles. We may change many things. We will change many things. The designer would. But with that much in place, you can start thinking about prongs. You can start thinking about relative thicknesses, angles, how open or closed is this, and you can take this information into Photoshop and draw on it, or sketch more here in Rhino. And that's where I'm going to end this for now. Thanks for watching.